Hi, this is Jabbar Ubaidi and welcome to InFocus. This is the second program being recorded in the studio or many studios really, but this is one of them at the College of Communication at the University of Sharjah. And Sharjah is one of the 7 Emirates in the United Arab Emirates. And it's my pleasure to bring to our audience in this episode Dr. Abdulrahman Azzi, who is the Dean of the College of Communication of the University of Sharjah. And he is well known in terms of his intellectual and cultural contribution in the area of media and communications. And in this episode, we would like to connect our understanding of time in the Middle East, if you wish, in the Islamic world, and also in the West in general, in the United States in particular, because there are a lot of general phrases that we use as audience, which is time is of the essence. Time is money. Time is this and that. And people, they use these general phrases without really integrating them or make them as part of their daily use in terms of the exactism. Because when you be exact, that means you determine to attend an event. You are determined to do a job. You are determined to accept the responsibility. And so in this session, I'm personally very excited for this opportunity for 2 reasons. One is this is not a typical InFocus TV program, because I think it will benefit the students of media and communication, as well as I think some of our students and faculty in philosophy, because time is part of the philosophy, and I think our guests will cover these 2 areas. The second reason is that this is the first time we're going to have in our collection in the library of Bridgewater State University and the Center for Middle East something related to time coming from an author of 6 books, altogether probably more than 20 books if we take into consideration the authorship and the co-authorship. So Dr. Azzi, I'm thrilled to have you as our guest to talk and to really lead us slowly to talk about the concept of time, the value of time, and this value of time, because people, they don't understand value. They think they understand it. I think I understand it. So would you please take us step by step for your own interpretation for this value?
Thank you very much, Professor Jabbar, for inviting me to your program InFocus. And I take this opportunity again to give my greeting to your audience and the student and faculty community at Bridgewater University. Basically, the concept of time is 1 chapter in my 2nd book. And it's linked.
What is the title of your 2nd book?
The 2nd book is Media and the Disintegration of Value System in the Arab Muslim region, and I divide it into chapters. First chapter is time. So today I will just limit myself to the first chapter. Time, of course, I view time in terms of form, sequence, flow of time, and rhythm. Rhythm, this is a concept I have taken from Ibn Khaldun. I will refer to him later on. So there is form, and then there is content. Content means how time is immersed in culture, in history, in civilization. So you have 2 dimensions of time. And my study basically is informed by the Quranic teaching plus the contributions made by Ibn Khaldun. He talks about the concept of rhythm, and the contributions of another scholar called Malik bin Nabi. He talks about the conditions of civilization, and he talks about man, time, and space, and he makes this link. And also I involve what I call Western contributions, and I make reference to such authors as Max Weber and William James. So I try to connect so many different dimensions. And basically, if I start with the Quranic dimension, actually there is a chapter in the Quran by the title of time that starts with the notion of time. And if we read the text, we will find so many dimensions. One of them is time relates to man's relation with God, with human beings, and with nature. So there is this kind of
so with
dimension.
God, with human nature, and with human nature and what?
I'm talking about human beings and
human beings.
Yes, as a second dimension. And there is also the emphasis on respect of time as one value of time. In terms of when you do worship, for example, you have to respect time in a strict sense of the term. And actually there is a verse which says, the prayer is obligatory for believers at specific times. In other words, you have to respect time. But then time in the Quranic framework is cyclical. In other words, there is a cyclical dimension. It goes and then it declines and then it goes. This applies to the individual as such. So you are in a way, you are in a way created in weakness, but then you are given strength, and then you become weak again, and then. So there is this cyclical dimension. It also applies to societies and civilization. And actually the teaching of the Quran says for every nation is an appropriate time. When the time has come, they cannot delay it or advance it. In other words, it's cyclical. And then there is the dimension of the temporal versus the eternal. And this actually you find in many religions, including Christianity. So you have the body and the spirit. So the body is related to the temporal, and the spirit is related to the eternal.
Dr. Azzi, what's the relation between time and the self?
Yes,
because that's when the idea of respecting time.
Yes,
usually it's originating within self.
Within self.
So how do you see that in terms of?
Actually, in my explanation of time, I have divided time into 4 types, and of course I will refer to it later because I started with the Quranic, and then I will talk a little bit about Ibn
I'm talking
Khaldun.
about the Quranic itself, with the verses that you mentioned.
Yes, the self means the self means that you are aware of time, and then the time is usually ethical time. In other words, you always have the notion of raising question about what's right and what's wrong in your conscience. And then you apply this in every dimension of your life.
Okay.
And this is what I call the ethical time. The ethical time. Unfortunately, the ethical time is not the dominant time for most individuals in modern society. It's just part of the process. But then I have developed this concept based on contributions of so many other authors. The second one after the Quranic teaching is Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun, I took the concept of rhythm in terms of, it's part of the form, but it also involves content. The rhythm means the way we use time. And he thinks that each civilization produces its own rhythm. Whether it's, for example, fast or slow or moderate. And actually, he made a very contribution in terms of the impact
And he was right, and he's right, because in the West usually say, in the United States we say our society is a fast-paced society.
Yeah, that's
meaning everything is fast.
This is really what Ibn Khaldun was talking about, and he made.
It's interesting you mentioned that.
Yes, and he gave weather conditions as a main factor for this, and actually he divided the planet into 7 regions.
Yes.
And he says that every region has a special rhythm in terms of the way people use time. And he thinks when the weather is very hot, people have slow rhythm. When it's very cold, they have a very kind of fast rhythm, the one you mentioned right now. And this affects not only the way they do things, but also their industries, their professions, because they are able to develop those things in a special rhythm, which is different from one situation to another. And also he, in his theory of time, he followed the cyclical development again, which I mentioned.
Yes.
It's in line with the Quranic teachings in terms of the rise and the fall of civilization. And he thinks that the social solidarity, which connect people together and give time a new dimension, will push civilization to rise. But then when people are disintegrated, and they have a time which is dispersed, and they act as individuals, then they set the stage for decline. So the rise and decline is based on the way people connect to one another, based on the way they use their time. So that is the notion I took from Ibn Khaldun, the rhythm. And then you have another scholar who is a modern scholar by the name of Malik bin Nabi. He talks about conditions of civilization.
What's his nationality?
He's an Algerian scholar who started writing in French. His first book called The Quranic Phenomena. But then he wrote so many books in Arabic, and one of them is The Conditions of Civilization. And he talks about 3 dimensions of civilization: man, time, and space. Space means...
Let me just, if you just join us, and this is InFocus, and in the studio with me, Dr. Abdulrahman Azzi, and we're talking about the concept of time and the value of time, and in its relation to the Quranic interpretation and also some philosophers. So with that, so you said the 3 elements. For Malik bin Nabi and from Algeria. So it's just the 3 elements.
Yes, you have man, time, and space.
Okay.
He says that if those 3 elements are integrated through an energy which comes from ethics, for him religion, then they move in such a way they create a civilization. But if they are left alone, they are not connected, so time is wasted, and man is reduced, and the land becomes unproductive.
Who is the agent of connectivity?
The agent of connectivity is the value system, which usually comes from religion, according to his interpretation. And he also followed the same cyclical explanation which I just mentioned about Ibn Khaldun. And he says that civilization goes through the spiritual stage where people use time spiritually. And then you have the rational stage, the second stage, where people use time rationally. We talk about reason. And then you have the last stage where people follow their inclinations or instincts, in which case they use their time for, let's say, selfish or personal reasons. And his idea actually is very similar to some of ideas mentioned by some Western scholars, like, for example, Arnold Toynbee, when he talks about the rise and falls of civilization.
But let me go back to the rationalization of time. How could you elaborate on this? How is it an individual rationalization, or is a communal rationalization? Sorry, because this is I think an interesting concept.
I think for Malik bin Nabi, when he talks about rationalization, he's talking about the individual, and he's basing this, I think, on the Western experience. And he thinks that the rational thinking is a special time where you focus on reason and you exhaust yourself thinking, and you are in a way somehow disconnected from the spiritual dimension, because here is the second stage of civilization. In other words, you have the dominant thinking in the second stage is rational. You do have some connection
Yes.
with the spiritual dimension, but it's not as dominant. So as you develop the rational stage, and then you exhaust your thinking, and then you become individualistic, and then you follow your inclinations towards selfish things, then you set the stage for a decline, because then you reduce also your rational time and you follow only your own instincts. So it's a cyclical interpretation based on the way time is perceived at each
so
stage.
what's the value of this in our modern life?
He applies this to the Arab-Muslim context, and he said those three elements are not connected. In other words, man, time, and space in the Arab-Muslim region have lost the energy which comes from the ethical dimension of religion, and thus they explain why, for example, there is no progress toward civilization in that region.
So progression has to do a lot with
the way they are connected. Those three elements, yes.
Okay, and so you think this is one of
the explanations. This is one of the explanations.
And you buy into this. You believe in it.
In my, of course, in my analysis, I have divided time into, or classified, I should say, time into 4 types.
Okay.
The first one is what I call the social time. Social time means the lived experience, the ones you mentioned right now, for example, the way you interact with your family, with your community, with your work. It involves so many dimensions in reality. This is called social time.
Okay.
And the social time has its own dynamism. And then the second time, which I explained, is the media time, the communication time. That is the time which is brought by the media, the mass media. And here also I inserted the rhythm, because the rhythm of the communication rhythm is different from the social rhythm.
Of course.
And then if they are not connected, then what you have some tension between the two levels.
Okay, so the social time, the media time.
And the media time. And this has some relevance in the Arab Muslim context, because the media time, when you move from rhythm to content, I mentioned time has form and content.
Yes.
Part of the content of the media is imported content. In other words, you had another dimension which creates more tension in terms of relationship between communication time and social time. And then I talked about the third element is the religious time. Religious time, I'm not talking about the ethical dimension. I'm talking about practices, rituals.
Okay.
You may also use traditions. It's the way people practice their own beliefs through certain rituals, which they have.
With this is a universal practice, though.
I have separated religious time from ethical time, because ethical time relates to the individual effort to understand and apply and be conscious about the value system. So I call it the fourth dimension, the ethical time.
Okay.
Now, for me, the way I classify them, the ethical time, which I mentioned as the last one actually, is the first one. I started with the social, and then the media, and then the religious, and then the...
So social time plus media time,
yes,
plus religious time,
plus
ethical times. This is the three.
Fourth.
No, the 1 and 2, 3.
Yes.
Kinds. That would probably create the foundation to your ethical dimension, or all connected together?
My theory is usually about, it's a normative theory.
Okay.
It seeks
Okay.
how things ought to be,
Okay.
taking into consideration the reality, which is
Okay.
which takes different kind of dimensions. But what I say is, if we use this in the Arab Muslim context, we will find that those four levels of time are disconnected.
Okay.
And that's why we, in a way, were not able to move in a way which may create
Dr. Azzi,
civilization.
is this public knowledge, or just this is people that in
This is
your
an
position and
yeah.
other intellectual?
This is an intellectual.
People
Yeah, you're right. I mean,
of science.
yeah, it's an intellectual type of thinking, common, of course, only among scholars who are interested in the issue of culture and
Okay.
civilization. Of course, I have introduced the media dimension. This is what's new about my contribution. Is I involved the time which is created or developed by means of communication.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of rhythm, because the media rhythm is in a way pushing or influencing in certain ways the social rhythm and the religious rhythm. But again, I added the content. In other words, the content which is not usually in harmony with other types of time.
So the media time.
Yes.
And the content of media.
Yes.
Is this an invitation for numbing the society and making, especially in the Middle East and the Islamic world? I mean, they're gonna be at the receiving end, and they don't necessarily value time as a productive.
You're right. Yes.
Or production or adding something. I mean, this is I'm a little bit surprised that they don't connect the four elements or the four times together to pace their level of productivity.
This is a good question. Actually, in my thinking is you couldn't really do something which you are not aware of. In other words, you have to have awareness.
Okay.
And to have awareness, then you have to link yourself to what I call the ethical system and work on it. And that's not really happening because, as you know, people do not always raise questions about their own cultural assumptions or about the way they were raised or trained, and they just maybe follow the trends and the situation. So they are dominated by what we call, for example, social time or religious time.
Okay.
But the ethical time is reduced, and I should say this is reduced in many societies, but at different levels because we are not on the same level of development. And
so who would actually make this part of the public knowledge? I mean, is it, do you think academic institutions? Do you think is mosques and churches and whatever, temples? Who are going to do this?
I think it's broader than this. It's a cultural and historical process which takes place through, so many elements. And if you follow the Western experience, Max Weber thought that the process of modernization was slow and took a lot of time. In other words, because you are talking about mentalities. So mentalities is something you couldn't really change just by talking about it. There are so many factors which are immersed in culture and history and civilization, and they do play in the process. So the issue is a little bit complicated, but I try to maintain this hierarchy, I should say, of time.
Maintain the momentum.
Yeah, momentum based on the ethical time,
yes,
which is the one which ought to inform the social and the religious and the what's the other one? The social, the religious, and
the media and the
the communication.
So speaking of
yes.
the media time, you know, we are under pressure now with the
Yes.
time because I think we have less than 2 minutes. Could you just wrap some of the idea
Well,
about the value and
yes.
what's the theory? I mean, this is part of the theory. What's
Yes.
the theory quickly?
Actually, I have made reference to Western experience when you mentioned the term time is money in the West, and the way I view the term is I take the term as a statement and then use it as a language, and it can become a discourse, and
Yes.
it's linked to civilization. So when you say time is money, the first impression is that you are focusing on the material dimension of time. But actually there is some spirituality in the term of the time is money, because Max Weber actually thought, do we still have some time?
I think we will add it with the spiritual connection
Dimension of
with your self, with your community, and with your work. And with this note, I would say thank you for watching InFocus, and thank you, Dr. Abdulrahman Azzi, for your great contributions. And we will continue talking about this concept, very important concept for us in the United States and the West, and also for the region in the Middle East and Islamic world. Thank you so much for InFocus, and thank you for our crew.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jabbar.